This week, as I mentioned, we're going to discuss that last part of the 10th chapter where Krishna explains to Arjuna all of the various examples of his manifestation. And I'm not going to read all of them because there's dozens and dozens and dozens of them, but I'll read a few of them to give you a flavor and the beginning and the end. So let's begin. It begins here on chapter 10, stanza 18. Arjuna is speaking. "O Janardana, tell me at length of your yoga powers and manifestations, for I never tire of listening to this nectar-like speech of yours." The blessed Lord said, "O best of princes, I shall willingly relate to you something of my manifestations, but I'll relate only those which are outstanding, for of my variety there is no end. O Gurukesha," speaking to Arjuna, "I am the true self dwelling in the heart of all creatures. I am the beginning, the continuation, and end of their existence. Among the Adityas, I am Vishnu. Among luminaries, I am the sun. Among the wind gods, I am Archi. Among luminaries, I am the moon. Among the Vedas, I am Samaveda. Among the gods, I am Indra. Of sense perceptions, I am mind. In creatures, I am their intelligence. Among the Rudras, I am Shankara. Among Yakshas and Rakshasas, I am Kubera. Among Vasus, I am Pavaka. Among mountain peaks, I am Meru. O of priests, O son of Pritha, know me as Brihaspati. Among generals, I am Skanda. Among bodies of water, I am the ocean. Among rishis, I am Brigu. Among words, I am the syllable of Om. Among yagyas, I am Japa Yagya. Among things unmoving, I am the Himalaya. And so he goes. Among the many here, among the deceivers, I am gambling. And of course, among gamblers, he says, I am Shakuni. I am the rod of discipline. I am the skill of the victorious. I am the silence of hidden things. Among knowers, I am wisdom. Whatever being is endowed with power, prosperity, or glory, know that that endowment itself is to be only a spark of my effulgence. What need you, however, O Arjuna, for these manifold details? Know this only: I, the unchanging and everlasting, permeate and sustain the entire cosmos with but a fraction of my essential being." And thus ends the 10th chapter, called From the Unmanifested to the Manifested. Like I said, I only read a fraction of those. It's fun. You should go read them yourself and to get the flavor of the variety of what Krishna was speaking about. He was speaking about in all of these forms that he manifests. And as he says when he starts, he says, I will reveal to you just the glorious. And on one sense, when you read this, you could compare it to many scriptures where the praises to the Lord are extolled. And so in that sense, it would be very similar to what other scriptures do and other traditions, because it's something common to speak of the glories of the Lord and the greatness that the devotee feels for that. But we should remember also that Krishna prefaces this by saying he's just going to speak of the highlights of the glorious side, but that he implies, as well as actually saying, that he could have just as well said, I am also the meanest of the mean. I'm the most banal. I'm the average. I'm the poorest. Because God is everything. And sometimes when we just see the glorious side, we think that surely that's the Lord. The Lord is only the glorious side. Krishna is only manifesting. God only manifests as that highest octave. but we have to remember that God is like a play. He's the actors, He's the director, He's the producer, He's the playwright. He plays all of it. Every role is a manifestation of the divine. So Krishna manifests us all on all levels. And it's not just the glorious, but of course the glorious is dear to our heart because it's that toward which we aspire. So we look up to that. And so he recounts those aspects which are inspiring, that we aspire, but we are also inspired by seeing that highest level. And so he relates this, but don't forget, he's also all, because God is in everything. It's all his play. And you could say that we temporarily are playing our part in this, and each of us have our own individual role. You might say too, I think any scripture like this, Krishna certainly has a message in this as well. And we can read many of them. I mentioned a few already. But it reminds me of that story that I've told before, probably in these discourses, of Swamiji giving a discourse about God in Australia, and one Australian gentleman afterward, who was an atheist, came up to Swami and says, "I'm an atheist. What do you have to say to me?" And Swami, how am I supposed to relate to God? And Swami thought for a moment, and he told the man, he says, "Why don't you think of God as your own highest potential?" And the man considered that for a moment. He says, "Well, that works for me." And it's true. Think of that. It says God is your own highest potential. And in a sense, Krishna here, by giving the examples of the most glorious, the most exalted manifestations in countless dozens of examples, he's showing what perhaps could be considered the highest potential in each realms of those manifestations. And each of us can aspire to that higher realm. And it's important that we do be inspired and aspire, because what happens when we encounter a great person, perhaps in this life, and we're inspired by that person, or we hear something beautiful that inspires us, whatever it is, that whenever we encounter inspiration, what happens within us? There's an upliftment of life force within us, and there's an upward movement. And that movement, whenever there's an upward movement of life force within the body through inspiration, is a typical example, there's a sense of expansion, and there's a sense of joyfulness that comes, and we feel our sense something larger than ourselves. And by seeing our own potential, it helps us to aspire to that. And as we're inspired in our aspiration, we feel that sense of joy, we feel that sense of experience of the divine in that very aspiration itself. And so we can think, why not think of God as our own highest potential? What could that potential be? And so consequently, if you're a gambler, well, I'm going to aspire to be Shikuni. And if the mountains, aspire to be the Himalayas, or you could say whatever it is, although Shikuni, a gambler, is not necessarily somebody that we would look up to. But if that is your nature, in whatever way, if our nature is that of a gambler, well, why not be the best gambler? If we're going to be a businessman, why not be the best businessman? Why not aspire to that? Now, yes, I know these are worldly pursuits, and some of them perhaps are not so savory. But as long as we're doing something in this world and we're embodied in this ego, and we see what we're doing is important to us, why not aspire to be the best at it? Because what will happen is, as we aspire towards something, to reach and fulfill our potential in that outward realm, sooner or later we'll discover it really doesn't give us what we're looking for. But it's much better to aspire to be good at something outwardly, even if it is somewhat delusive, than to fail at it. You sort of, you see this oftentimes, people, they fail at something and they pretend that they're not attached. Well, it was just a worldly pursuit. I didn't really want to have that anyway. It's just an excuse that they didn't have the qualities to make a success at it. And whatever we do in life, let's be successful. And yes, it's a worldly success, but that worldly success will then become a platform till we say, well, that really wasn't quite it, was it? And we'll try for something else. And then, no, that wasn't it. Till finally, we lift ourselves up until we begin to look for something that is lasting and that's real for us. And that's, so when we're looking outwardly, when we're aspiring towards something, whatever it might be, depending upon the level of our own inner realization. We're not saints yet. And so we have to look up to the next level that may not yet be a saint to it, but it's the next step on the ladder for us, and we aspire to that. Now what happens is, in life, if we don't aspire to be better than what we are and perfect ourselves, tendency might be we don't put energy out, and we have to put energy. And if we don't put energy out, perhaps we fail. Now, we want to be not, if we fail, or you might say, as Swami would say, we haven't yet succeeded, we want to try and try and try again. And if I've noticed this in my life, is when I've done something and I have not succeeded at it, some people say, oh, it was just a worldly pursuit anyway, why bother with it? I notice that doesn't seem to work so well. I find that if I can't do something well, and I didn't do it well, or let's say better way, I didn't give it my best attention. Because sometimes, we're made in a way that we cannot be perfect at everything. We can only do our best. But oftentimes I failed at something and I look back and I realize that the cause of my failure was my lack of effort and my lack of attention. I failed in that sense. I didn't give it my all. And as long as that was there, I have some sense in my mind that I need to come back and do it again in order to pass that test. It's like I failed the grade and I have to now repeat the class again. And because I didn't try and I didn't do it well enough from my failure, my lacking. Now, if I tried my best and I didn't do so well, that's okay. But I look back and so I go back and I say, no, I'm going to do it and do it and do it until I succeed. And then once you succeed, it's like doing a puzzle. If you can't, you know how sometimes you play children's games, puzzles, you can't get that puzzle quite right. So you just keep doing it, and finally, got it. And once you get the puzzle done, you throw it away and you're done with it. But it sort of nags at you until you accomplish it. So for our own sake, now I may be unusual that way, but I think there's something in there for all of us, that we keep aspiring, and I see Krishna here showing this highest level of worldly accomplishment, you might say, that is the potential for wherever we are on the spiritual path to aspire to that. We know that as long as we're embodied in this spot, in this ego, in this worldly reality, that the gunas prevail. Tamas, rajas, sattva, and we're subject to the gunas. And God is manifest in all gunas. God is manifest in tamoguna. God is manifest in rajaguna. God is manifest also in sattva guna. But yet, in sattva, we aspire to sattva because he's less obscured in sattva guna. And so here when Krishna, he elucidates these manifestations, and you could say they're at the highest peak, the sattvic peak of expression. And we want to raise ourselves to that level because God is, you could say, God is revealed more in those highest levels. They're less obscuring at that level. But we have to keep in mind that the old saying that chains of gold, they still bind. Because as long as we're within this physical body and as long as we're subject to the dictates of the gunas, that we're not free. But yet, it's still, as long as Yogananda said, as long as we're embodied, as long as we have to live in this world, why not live well? Why not live to the highest level possible? And why not try to do a good thing? Because then it's more freeing that way. And for our own selfish sake, it's more joyful to live that way. And not only is it more joyful for us, but it's more joyful for the people around us. And also, there's less heavy bondage that takes place there. It's the chains are there, but yet they're slighter. And we lift ourselves to a point where we can dedicate ourselves more fully and more deeply to God. I mentioned that raising to our highest potential, defining God as our own highest potential. And I think that's a mark of our being able to see ourselves as in terms of our potential, but also seeing other people according to their potential as well. Not being bound by seeing either ourselves or other people as they are now. Oftentimes it's just a very thin screen, that behind that screen there's often a beautiful soul behind there waiting to come out. And I think this is why people resonated and felt so immediately attracted to a great saint such as Paramahansa Yogananda, because he, as do all great saints, when he saw people and he looked at people, he didn't define them in his mind or see them according to their outward personality. He saw them on a soul level, and that soul level is their potential. He saw the potential of, there's a little bit of obscurity now, blow that away, and the true beautiful soul will come out. And because he saw that in everyone who came to him, the people who did come to him felt that. They could see in him a reflection of their own higher self. He wasn't mirroring back to him their limitations or their faults or failures. He was mirroring back to them their own higher potential. And so naturally, when people came into his aura, they felt immediately attracted to him. And because of that, they wanted to please him. They felt that love from him because it was their own higher self that they were viewing through him. And so we can take that in our own life as a lesson. One, not seeing ourselves too seriously in terms of who we are right now. As Master said, never call yourself a failure or never call yourself a sinner. Never call yourself anything, really. He didn't like people to say, I'm unwell. He said, your body's not doing well. Don't identify with the body. Don't identify who and what you are right now. He even discouraged people from sharing their age, their physical age, because you begin to identify with that. Oh, I'm old now, or I'm just a young person. I can't possibly do it yet. He says, no. He says, we're ancient. None of us are older and younger in that sense. And we don't want to identify. And at the same time, not identifying ourselves by these outward things, but rather directionally toward what we are aspiring toward. But also don't look at other people that way as well. And this, I think, is a key to, one, it's a way to bless other people, is when you see people according to their highest potential, you're going to bring that out of them. And this is what we do when we bless people. You see God is in them, and the God within me relates to the God within you. And in this way, we dissolve those ego barriers. And by doing that, we actually do give a blessing, because a person feels that a little spark of that has been awakened within them. And so this is something we can do, both for ourselves and for other people, seeing them according to their potential. This is to what we are, all of us, eventually moving. So here, remember this in this reading this week, Krishna is extolling all of this marvelous manifestations of his manifestations in this world. But he's just giving the tip, you might say, the upper tips of that sattvic nature. But underneath it all, he's everything. He's the actor playing all the parts. And this is what we ultimately aspire to as well. We're not this body. We're not this personality. We're not this limitation. We're free. We're something higher. We're all of this. When just as God is all of this, that we too ultimately will come to realize that we are part and parcel of everything as well. Many blessings to you this week, and we hope to see you again next week.